my name is Dawn and I am the Ginger Cat Stitcher. Welcome to my channel. Today I am so excited to share with you a step-by-step tutorial on how to make these two absolutely adorable stuffed dolls. The pattern is by Cinnamon Creek Folk Art on Etsy, and if you would like to make these for yourself, stay tuned. Thanks for joining me on a sew along today. We're going to make these winter children. This is a pattern by Cinnamon Creek Folk Art. It was designed by Drew Ann Jeffries, and here's the link to her Etsy shop. I'll go ahead and put that in the description below as well. And this is for 10-inch dolls. The pattern is called Winter Children, and I just fell in love with them. So that's what I'm going to make today. So the pattern is a total of 9 pages, including the front cover here. It's well written and does have some nice color photographs. It is a pattern that does assume you have some experience sewing cloth dolls. So some of the steps she doesn't go into a whole lot of detail. For example, she'll just say sew the legs on the doll. So if you've never done that before, that might kind of be a little bump in the road for you. But she does give nicely drawn pattern pieces. And then on the last page, she even also gives some tips on embroidering the faces. So one of the things that she suggests is to age all of your fabrics before you begin. So I've already done that. And I really loved her choices of fabric on here. I think that kind of really makes the dolls and how they look. So I tried to get as close to that as I could. So for their bodies and their faces, she used flannel. So I bought a piece of flannel and then I aged it using walnut dye. So this is what it looks like after it's aged. And then for the little girl's jacket, she suggests a piece of batting, and I went ahead and aged that as well. So I have those two pieces already aged. I have a little stripe for her legs. The picture, it's blue and white, but I had yellow and white. I think that'll be okay. And then I have a piece of antique mattress ticking here that I thought would work great for the little girl's skirt. So that's already naturally aged. And then I have a piece of this plum colored linen that I thought would work nicely for the little boy's jacket. And then you'll need a piece of brown wool. This is just from a thrift store skirt. Just a nice piece of thin brown wool. You don't want it to be too thick since these are just little dolls. Thinner is better. And then I have some assorted sweaters and stuff that we'll get into in a little bit when it comes time to make their clothes. So first step would be to trace your pattern pieces. All the pattern pieces are included in the pattern, of course, and they are hand drawn, which is my favorite because I think that gives them such a nice handmade quirky look to them. So we're going to trace all of the pattern pieces onto a plain piece of paper and get that cut out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And now that my pieces are all traced and cut out, it's time to put them onto the flannel fabric. We're going to be doing the head and the arms and the legs and the body, except for the boy's body and legs. Those get done out of the wool. So let me go ahead and trace these on there. You're going to trace directly onto the wrong side of the fabric, and you're going to have right sides folded together. And I'm trying to decide, this is beautiful, but I think it's too busy for their faces. So I'm going to say that that's the wrong side of the fabric and make this plainer side for their faces. So I'm going to go ahead and do that using my friction pen, which you're not going to see it anyways because it's going to be on the inside. But if you do see any, I can just take a hair dryer or a heat gun to it, or even an iron, and it'll come right off. So let me go ahead and trace out my pattern pieces. All right, so I've been tracing my pattern pieces onto the fabric, and I don't want to show the pattern pieces. I want to be respectful of the author, but I want to show you, let's see if I can do this here. When you are doing little pieces for a doll like this, you're going to sew right on your tracing line. So you don't want to cut out the pieces before you sew because they're just too small and that would make it really hard. So you're going to leave all of your pieces onto the fabric and sew on the drawn line. So what you need to make sure of is that you leave enough room between the two so that you have enough fabric to cut apart. In this case, it's the legs. So you want to be able to cut apart both legs without getting too close to your stitches. And another tip that I have for you, when you are tracing pattern pieces onto something dark like this wool, go ahead and use a Sharpie marker that'll show up on the wool. And since we're drawing on the wrong side of the fabric, you won't be able to see it when the pieces are stitched together. Okay, so I have most of my pieces sewn here, and I just wanted to give you a couple tips. First of all, when you're turning something big like this right side out, it's best to put your fingers all the way down to the bottom and then push that bottom part through and then pull it out this way. I just feel like that puts a lot less strain on the seams. And then you'll also need a good skewer or dowel. This one I've had for a long time. I think it came in a package of stuffing, actually. Oh, and that's another thing that's not on the list of supplies, but it's definitely something that you'll need. And so this will just help you turn. And then there's the little girl's body. And then I wanted to point out in the pattern, it doesn't specifically say how to go about sewing the top of the coat, but I just sewed to where the shoulders would be and then left this open because this is 2 layers of batting and you want to be able to have a front and back of your coat. All right, and then once you get your coat cut out, you're going to pick a side to be the front and a side to be the back, and then you will just cut up through 1 layer of the batting. So that's why you didn't want to sew all the way across the top there, is because you want it to be able to open. And then we will very carefully turn the sleeves right side out. Since it is batting, it's going to be a little sensitive to how much pressure you put on it. We don't want to poke a hole in it or anything. And then I wanted to show you a tip for turning these tiny little arms and legs. They do sell specific doll turning tubes, but I find that just this skewer or dowel works just fine for these. So you're going to go to the end. Here's your open end. You want to go to the sewn end and kind of push that up in there a little bit. Now this is a little fiddly, and you just have to take your time with it and do it gently. You don't want to poke the skewer up through the stitches, but we're just going to nice and gently get this poked up in there. And like I said, it is a little fiddly to get started. There we go. But once you get it started, and you just want to gently pull down. Don't push on the stick so hard that you pop it through the stitches, like I said, but just nice and gently push this through. And it works so much easier this way than trying to start at the open end. And there we go. some extra little strings in there. And then use your stick to open the seams. And then there. And then when it comes to turning the coat, I think what works best with this is just very gently pull. I tried using my dowel and it just was kind of poking through. So I think now that I've got that turned, I can maybe push a little bit. There's a slow fiddly thing, but just take your time and get that poked through. And I'll go ahead and do that with the other sleeve. Okay, now it's time for one of my most favorite parts, and that's to stuff the pieces. I love this part because this is when they start coming to life. So you want to stuff it nice and firm. You don't want it lumpy, but you want it firm, but not so firm that it distorts the shape. So a bit about the stuffing. This is just polyester fiber fill, and you want to get the kind that says dry. So this is Polyfill Crafter's Choice, and you want to make sure it's the dry filling. The other one will be labeled wet, and it has a very slick feel to it, kind of a wet feel, and that you'll never be able to get it packed firm. It just is slippery, and it's good for pillows that you want to be fluffy or something, but when you're doing a doll, you want to get it stuffed nice and firm. So make sure that you use the fiber fill labeled dry. And so when it comes to these little pieces that you can fit your finger all the way down in there, there's no need for a tool or anything. You want to use small bits. If you use big pieces, you're going to end up with lumps that you're not going to be able to get out. And you can fit your finger down in there, so just push it all the way down to the edge and make sure that you are getting it all the way to the seams. So you're just going to be taking a little bit at a time and stuffing it on down in there. And just take your time with it. Shape it as you go, but you want to make it nice and firm. Then for the tiny little guys, you can use a pencil with an eraser. That works, the eraser end works really well to kind of grab, the eraser kind of grabs the fiber fill and lets you push it in there better. I'm just going to use my little dowel here, and you're going to use a tool to get it poked in on these smaller pieces, and you're going to get it pushed all the way down to the end and pack it on in there. That's why it's important to use this dry fiber fill. So that piece just did that much of the hand. So little pieces, you're going to pack it all in there. You're going to stop it about right here. So you're going to leave, what is that, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch unstuffed, so that we will be able to stitch it to the shoulders of the body. So this part is so much fun. So let's go ahead and stuff and stuff. And here's my little coat. I got that all turned right side out. So, and here's her little legs with the striped fabric. So, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. So let's go ahead and get these stuffed. Okay, now I'm going to sew on the leg. First thing that I'm going to do is turn the raw edges in. I'm going to fold them over and then just stitch the leg closed. And I want to do this because I want that edge to be nice and neat, because you will see it in the finished doll. So I'm going to go ahead and just stitch that closed. Okay, and now that I have that all closed up and have the edges slightly rounded, I'm going to decide where I want to put it onto the body. And then I'm just going to make sure that it's centered on that side seam. And I'm going to hold it in place, and then I'm just going to whip stitch it through the body and then through the leg. And then I'll just go all the way side to side, making sure that I get those edges stitched down to make the leg lay nice and flat against the body. Okay, now it's time to stitch the head onto the little girl. So I'm going to take my length of strong thread and put a knot in that one end. And I'm just going to place the head inside the opening on the body, and I'm going to hide my tail inside. And then I'm just going to do a whip stitch between, I'm going to fold this raw edge in, and then just whip stitch the head onto the body. This is going to be hidden by the scarf, so I didn't feel like it needed to be super neat and tidy. So just as I was working on trying to get this head stitched on and my thread kept getting tangled in the arm, that's when the boss decides to show up, check in. Of course, isn't it always a way when the boss shows up, you're struggling. But so he's inspecting what I'm doing. This is my ginger cat, Percy, and he's walking over top of everything while I'm trying to get this untangled here. And then you'll see in just a minute here, he decides to jump off, and as he does, he knocks my entire table over. Okay, so now I'm going to sew the other arm on. I folded the raw edges in just to give it a nice finished look there on the side. I'm going to start at the middle and line it up on the seam and just whip stitch it onto the body. And I go from the center out to the edge, and then I go through the fabric back to the center and then out to the other edge. And doing it that way, just half at a time, helps me keep the arm straight and keeps it centered, doesn't let it slide all over. So, and I also double check and make sure that it's going to be the same length as the other arm, that I've got it in the right place on the shoulder there. All right, so I have the little leggings sewn, and you don't need to worry about, doing anything other than just the legs, because you won't see up under the skirt. So now is in the pattern suggested to paint on their shoes. So I just used a pen and marked a line so I could make sure to keep the shoes the same height on each foot. And I'm just going to use just this Apple Barrel black craft paint. Give it a bit of a shake. And then we're just going to paint directly onto the fabric. Okay, we're moving into the home stretch. So they both have their shoes painted on. And looks like I need to do a little touch up on that. The wool soaks in a lot of paint, so just be careful, just be patient and do several coats. So we have their shoes painted on. While that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and sew the little girl's skirt. and the pattern just has a rectangle for you to cut out. And then I also put on this smaller little rectangle here to be her apron. So we're going to turn it right sides together and just stitch down the side. And then we'll run a gathering stitch. So just an in and out running stitch across the top with some strong thread, and we'll pull it together so that it makes a nice pleated skirt for the little girl. So I'm gonna go on over to the sewing machine and zip down that side. Okay, so I got the skirt all stitched up. As you can see, I just did a running stitch there, and I left 2 long ends so that I can pull it tight. And her feet are pretty much dry. So we'll go ahead and slip on her skirt. And I want her leggings to be just peeking out the bottom. So I'm thinking that looks pretty good right there. We'll move him over. And we'll just tie here. You want to pull it taut, but not too tight. You want to be careful you don't break your thread. And then we'll go ahead and adjust the pleats. So I want more of the pleating in the front than the back. Give her a little squish, put her in shape. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so we're going to set her aside for a minute. And I have the boy's jacket here, and I just was not happy with the linen. It was a little thick, and I just didn't like the way that it hung on him, and I think I made it a little short. So I went ahead and found another piece of linen that is thinner, has a little better drape to it, and I made it a little bit longer. So we can go ahead and put the little boy's coat on. And I did sew when I re-sewed this little jacket here, I did sew outside of the tracing lines so that it would be a little bit looser. This one fit him a little too tight for the way I wanted it to look. Let's kind of adjust this down, and it's okay that his arms show a little bit here because he's going to have his scarf on him. So there we go. I think that is a cute little jacket on him and a cute little skirt on her. So now comes the exciting part, putting faces. So when I look at the pattern, she does give some nice tips about the face. And the thing that I think is so fun about faces is every single time you do one, they all come out different. So let's see, she suggests dark red or brown for the lips, and just says brown embroidery floss for the eyes. And then she uses a tiny white gel pen to draw the tiny little white dot in their eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and use my friction pen. I love this pen because I can draw the face, and if I don't like it, then I can erase it and start again. So I'm going to kind of visually mark the center of the fabric. So just kind of a gentle swiping of the pen like this, and you can't really see a line, but I can see kind of where the flannel has been kind of marked a bit for my face. So I'm gonna, let's see, her chin is just about right down here. I'm gonna say her mouth is about right there, and we'll give her a little turned up mouth. The nose is needle sculpted, so we'll just put a little line right there. And then her eyes, just tiny little bits like that. And then she has some eyebrows. Let's see, let me take a look at the face on here. Oh, okay. So we'll do the line a little closer to her eye for her eyelid. Kind of top and bottom, and then a little higher up for her eyebrow. So that looks a little messy, but I think I can remember where to put everything like that. Let's go ahead and do the boys. So if the boy's chin's gonna be about right here, I'm gonna kind of get a visual. So we're gonna put his little mouth right here. His nose will go there. Little eyes. And we do a little bit of stitching over and under. This one you can kind of get a better idea. So it almost looks like a capital I there. And then we'll do some eyebrows. That kind of gives you a little bit better idea than her sloppy eye. Okay, I've chosen my floss. I have a real dark brown for the eyes and the nose, and then a nice dark primitive red. So the red is 3777 and the brown is DMC 3371. She says 1 or 2 strands for the mouth. I'm going to go ahead and pull out 1 thread and double it for 2 strands. So, and tips for embroidering a doll's face. I learned this from my grandmother, who was a doll maker. Always come in at a place that is not going to be seen. So usually up here in the hairline, and these guys are going to have winter hats on. That's going to come down to about right there. But let's see, since the mouth is closer there, I actually think I'm going to come in from the brown where it's going to be covered over by the hat. So, I mean, sorry, by the scarf. So you always want to come in an area that's not going to be seen, and you don't want to run something like red up underneath the white fabric, because you'll see it. So I'm squishing the doll and I'm pushing my needle through. If you have a longer needle, that would be even easier. But I'm going to come out right here, and I'm going to take a tiny little stitch. Let's see, I'm going to turn this so I can turn him upside down. So I'm just going to do tiny little stitches for his mouth, and I'm going to do a back stitch. So I'm just going to come up tiny little way. You can see how small that piece of fabric is there. And then come over here a little bit. But when you're working on a small doll, the smaller your stitches, the better. And that way you can kind of control the direction of his mouth as well, because it's a little easier to turn up the edges. Okay, so that's all of the mouth that he's going to get. I'm going to put my needle in, and I'm going to come back here again, and I'm going to squish and feel where this needle is going to come out. Okay, so if you can see right there, the needle is coming out back at the base of his head. And we're going to pull that stitch tight. And there's his little mouth. And we're going to go ahead and fasten off in the back. Yeah, so my grandmother sewed cloth dolls for a very long time. And when I would visit with her, she would give me little tips. I was fascinated watching her sew the little dresses and the faces, and she taught me how to do a satin stitch for the eyes and how to start and stop your thread when you're doing the faces back where nobody would see. So there's the little boy's mouth, and let's go ahead and get the brown for his eyes. So the center part of his eye is going to be a satin stitch. We'll go ahead and, let's see, we'll do 2 long ones this time because we've got quite a lot to do. So I'm going to go ahead and pull off 2 pieces of embroidery floss. And then we're going to knot the end. Just like that. And so for the eyes and the nose I'm only going to use 1 floss, 1 string, so we'll do the eyes. So I'm going to come in from the top of the head, somewhere where I know is going to be covered over, and I'm just going to kind of wiggle it around until I come out right, oops, it moved, right at the base of where I want to start. And right there. So I'm going to start in the middle of the eye, and I'm going to do my stitches back and forth up and then back and forth down. So if you start from the middle, that kind of helps you keep the eye on track and doesn't grow too much on you. So I'm going to come across. That, and then I'm going to come right next to that stitch and right next to this one, and 1 more. These are just tiny little eyes. It looks like about 6 stitches will do the pupil. So now I'm going to come in across here again, and now I want to do the bottom half of my eye. So I'm going to go diagonally underneath the fabric and come out at the bottom of my first stitch, well, to the right underneath of my first stitch. And then I'm going to go back. Excuse me a minute, I have a cat claw in my leg. Okay. He just always has to be touching me, and sometimes he just forgets that his claws are out. At least that's what I tell myself. Okay, so now that's it for that eye. So I'm going to take this stitch across. Instead of going down, I'm going to go under. But I'm not going to come under where you can see it right underneath the flannel, because I don't want to see that embroidery floss under. So I'm going to dig up some of that stuffing in there and hide my thread through the stuffing. And then I'm going to come out in the middle of my eye. And I'm going to turn them upside down again. And then again, I'm going to do the same thing back and forth. And these are sweet little primitive dolls, so the eyes don't have to be perfect. Well, nothing ever has to be perfect. The whole point of doing this is because it's fun. And when you get a little quirky expression or little quirky eyes, I just think that makes the doll. Okay, so this is my third stitch here, so I'm going to go in where I normally would, but I'm going to go diagonally underneath and come up at the edge of that first stitch I made. And now I'm going to stitch. And you don't want to pull too tight either, because then your stitches will pucker the fabric. So we'll do number 2 and then number 3. Okay, so now I have a decision to make. I've got the little lines above and below the eyes, and I think I would like to do those with 1 strand of embroidery floss. Thought at first I would do 2, but I'm going to do 1. So we're going to take the needle and we can squish the head and manipulate the needle so that it comes back out. There we go at the top. And yeah, I think that looks pretty good. And we're going to just take a little piece of the fabric here and tie it off with 1, 2, pull it tight. And then another trick I learned from my grandmother is you pull it through and then put a little bit of tension on your embroidery floss, give it a clip, and then the tail is buried down inside the fabric. Okay, so let's take off one of these strings here, set that aside, rethread our needle, put our knot, okay, same thing, we're going to start up here at the top of the head, and let's go ahead and do the eyebrow. So when you look at the face on the pattern, get that, the eyebrow is made up of little straight stitches. I've never done eyebrows like that before, but we're gonna give it a shot and see. And if I don't like it, then I can take it out. But we're gonna go do the same thing. We're gonna go up from our first stitch and then put our needle in at a diagonal and come across. We'll try that. I might need one in between, but we'll try that. Tiny little straight stitches. Whoops. Kind of think the wonkier the better. I liked that crooked one I put in, so we'll do a crooked one. Whoops. Kind of using the wrong needle for this. I'm using a fat needle. Okay, so I made this first stitch a little longer than I did the last stitch to kind of give it that eyebrow look. Now I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to go under, grab a little bit of that stuffing, and come out right at the edge of where I drew his little eyelid. And we're going to do another back stitch. So we'll go right there. Let's see, which way should I be holding him? I've never done a back stitch this direction. Well, I'm sure I have, but I'm intimidating myself. Yeah, that's not gonna work. Huh. All right. Okay, I figured it out. No different than the other direction. We're gonna go this way. And then back to this way. And right there. And one more. Okay, and then we're going to do the bottom, so we'll come out there. We'll go back this way. Remember just to keep your stitches small. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that eye. Now we're going to do the nose. So to needle sculpt the nose, I marked down the middle of the nose, which is a little off center. We'll put it right there. We're going to again put the needle diagonally under, and we're going to come up right there. So to do the nose, we're going to go down and scoop up stuffing and then come out the other side and give it a bit of a pull. We're going to go down right next to where we came out, not in the same hole, but right next to it. Scoop up stuffing, and go right next to it and pull. And as you're pulling, that's going to raise up the nose a little bit. So we're going to go under here, come out right there, give it a bit of a pull. Right next to it. And the more stuffing that you can scoop up, the higher his nose is going to go because it's going to be more padded. Give it a little tug right there. Scoop up some stuffing and come out right next to that stitch. And we're almost to the end of his nose. Okay, I think probably one more. This is probably the last one. So I'm going to go in and under and back out his head. So I'm going to go in and push till I feel my needle right there and pull her out. That kind of looks like he's got a nostril there. So there's his nose. And we're going to go ahead and knot that on the top of his head. And I'll finish embroidering this eye, and then I'll get the girl's face, and then I'll be right back. Okay, both of the little kids have their clothes on. I stuck a little piece of fabric. I just tucked it into the girl's skirt right there because I didn't want her tummy to show. I thought she might get cold, so I put a little piece of fabric there so you wouldn't see her tummy. And I got the shoelaces stitched on, and honestly this was the hardest part of the pattern, trying to figure out how to run the thread to make the shoelaces, and one side has 3 and the other side has 2, but that's okay. So now they have their little jacket, and I made some hair for the little girl. I just took a sock weight yarn. That's really a very fuzzy, soft yarn, and I tied it in the middle, and after I get her hat on, I'm gonna stick that under there with a little piece of glue, I think. A little drop of glue. Okay, so now for their hats. This is the final step. So I have this gray sweater here that I cut off part of the cuff, and I thought it worked perfect. It has little moth holes and stuff in it. So I think this one is going to be for, I don't know, I think maybe the the little girl or the little boy. And then I have this sweater here, and I thought that the ribbing down at the bottom would work really well. Maybe she wants the pretty one. Yeah, I think that's what we'll do, is we'll do this one for the little girl and this one for the little boy. So for this one, since it's a cuff, I'm just going to cuff up that part, and it's a little big for his head, so I'm going to take in a little bit in the back. And I think the pattern does not give instructions on how to do the hats, but I think what I'm going to do is just gather it up. So I think I'll turn it inside out. I'll run a gathering stitch, gather that up, turn it right side out again, and I think that's how the top of his hat will be. Kind of like that. Just needs to fit him a little bit better. And then for the girl, I can just measure around the back, and I think I'll just cut that, sew it up, and do the same thing on the top. So give me a minute and we'll get that all sorted out. Okay, so I figured out the hats. All I did was cut a rectangle out of the sweater that was long enough to wrap around their heads, and then I sewed it. Let me turn this inside out. Then I took it over to the machine and I just stitched it together. So it was the same process as for the skirt. I stitched it together, and then I took some strong thread and I ran a running stitch around. For the boy, I did it on the inside to make it kind of tuck in like that, and on the girl, I'm doing it on the right side, the outside. So I just did that, and then I'm going to take the two ends, and then if you do, I think it's called a surgeon's knot, so you, just like you're going to tie your shoe, you bring that over and you go under, but go under one more time, like that. So now when you pull it together, get this tight. When you pull it together, it doesn't come loose. So you can go ahead and do your next part of your knot. And so now the girl has a little bit of the ruffly part on the top. And I'm gonna clip that down in there. So here's the little girl's hat. We're gonna try that on her. Yeah, I think that looks cute. You know what would be cute too is if you cut a really long one and it was like one of those long hats that hung down. That would be real cute too. So let's see, I'm gonna go ahead and stretch this out a little bit. She needs her hair tucked up in there. Let's see, how do I like it? Maybe over to the side a little bit. I think maybe that's too much hair. Let's put it up. Put it up there some. Yeah, just the barest little minimum sticking out. Okay. So I'm going to tuck that up there with a little bit of glue, and I think I'm going to do a little stitch in the hat to get the hat to fold over, not like in the way that it puffs up. Or maybe I'll put this on the inside. Let's see what that looks like if we just kind of tuck that down in there. I don't know, so you just have to kind of fiddle around with it and see how you like the hat. Yeah, I think it's just too long. I think I'm going to cut a little bit off. Okay, I figured out what the issue was with the other little hat. The sweater is a very thick sweater, so it just was not the right, like I said earlier, the right drape or just the right scale. So I found a thinner sweater, and it didn't have the nice ribbing on the end of it, but I kind of like the way that looks turned over like that, and just little bits of hair peeking through. So the last step in getting our little kids together here, let's tuck that in, maybe cut it off, I guess, is to put on their scarves. So we have her little coat. Let's get that on there. And then I chose dark blue for her. So this is just a strip cut from a sweater. And the sweater has been washed and dried, but it didn't felt super tight. And then I pulled on it to give it more of a frayed edge. And so I'm going to put her coat together. I cut the ends at an angle to kind of look like points. And then I'm going to wrap this around and come around here again. And I want her mouth just peeking out. I think I'll tuck this under here. I think adding the scarves just was the perfect little touch here at the end. We'll get her mouth to peek out a little bit. See her eyes. So there's the little girl all finished. She has her little leggings. Oh my goodness, she has strings everywhere. Her little leggings, her apron, her skirt. I think that's really cute. Oh, you know what? I just realized I meant to make the skirt stripes going the other way. Well. And now for the little boy. This jacket, and again I cut the scarf from a strip of sweater, and I'm just going to wrap his around the same way, just a little bit of his mouth peeking out there. And we'll pull this down a little bit more. Same thing with him. I'm just going to tuck that in. And there. So there they are. A winter little boy and a little girl. Hope you go ahead and give this pattern a try. I just am so pleased with the way they turned out. I think they're just adorable. So I have a couple tips that I wanted to give you that I came up with while making this. So tip number one when you're making cloth dolls is to use a small stitch length, a short stitch length. So on my vintage Singer, I put it at about 20 stitches per inch. And on a modern machine, I think that would probably be like a number 2. But you want to use a short stitch length to make sure you don't have any gaps in your seams. Let's see, don't overstuff and stress the seams. You want them to be stiff enough to hold their shape, and you don't want their head to flop, but you also don't want to stress the stitches on the seams. So first cut later, that's a really good rule of thumb when making dolls. So you would trace out your arm pattern or your jacket or whatever it is, and sew it on that line first and then cut it out. It just makes it so much easier rather than trying to work with these teeny tiny little pieces. Another one would be to use doll turning tubes. Those are available on Amazon, Etsy, online, wherever you want to buy them, or use a wooden dowel. It saves so much frustration when trying to turn long, skinny little arms and legs. Use a friction pen for drawing the face. I think embroidered faces add such charm and character to the doll that don't be scared to embroider the face. If you use a friction pen, you can just draw out your face. And if you don't like it, just use a blow dryer, a heat gun, or an iron, any kind of heat source, and it'll go away, it'll disappear, and then you can try again. But that's part of the charm of handmade dolls, is the quirkiness of their faces. So don't shy away from embroidering their faces. I already showed you the tip about starting and ending your embroidery floss in an area where it won't be seen. And then I think my number one tip that helps me when sewing tiny little pieces is I go barefoot to use the sewing machine. So when I have shoes on, I just do not have control over the foot pedal. But if I'm in my socks or barefoot, then I'm able to use the foot pedal to my advantage and make it go really slow and steady, and I'm able to turn around, turn all the corners and stuff. So that's my tip, is to go barefoot when you sew. So that's it. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you give Cinnamon Creek Folk Art a visit and try this adorable pattern. Thanks. Bye.